Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. This is our show for the races of Saturday, July 28th. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornital, back with you from the little house on the east side in the kitchen. I'm not out in the studio. There are people sleeping out there. It's Saratoga. It happens. But yeah, so we're in a little bit of a different, more makeshift setup, but there's whiskey in the background, so I think it's probably okay. Very excited for this weekend of racing, both north of the border in Woodbine, which we'll get to talking about later, out west at Del Mar. But we start in Saratoga, and we have a first-time guest, which is always very exciting. You probably know him if you're in the racing Twitter world, as I did, from the great stuff he posts over at Failed to Menace, another one of those great Twitter handles. And this summer, he is a content producer for our friends at NYRA and America's Day at the Races, doing all kinds of good work over there. He is Matthew DeSantis. Matt, what's going on, my man?
Peter, it's great to be here. Great to join you, and excited to talk about this amazing sequence. And yeah, when NYRA Bet said, "Are you willing to move up to Saratoga for the summer?" I said, "Don't twist my arm too much. I'll be happy to do that."
Let's do the quick plug for some of the other stuff you've got going in some of the other places that people will know you first. And then we'll talk about this pick six and then maybe even get in a word on the other Breeders' Cup winning you're in race this weekend, the King George over at Ascot.
Yeah, absolutely. So people can obviously find all my content on Twitter at Failed to Menace, but we have a lot going on at NYRA Bets. If you go to nyrabets.com, a lot of handicapping articles, videos, a lot of analysis of the different races, pick five sequences, pick six sequences, but also helping younger players out who maybe just want to get to know how to play a daily double and a pick three, something that's maybe not too overwhelming for first-time bettors. So really trying to approach this from a standpoint of how do we create content for bettors and future bettors to get them into the game and then to help them have winning experiences and grow them in the game because we all love it so much. And it's great to see new people get attracted to the sport.
A mission we have deep sympathy with, to say the least, over here at In the Money. So this pick six sequence starts off with race number 7, a very hot looking 2-year-old maiden race. I love the distance, 6.5. These seem like horses who aren't just going to be precocious, but maybe some that we're going to be hearing from in the future. We'll probably dive deep into this one on our Baby Talk show that'll be coming out this weekend as well. But in terms of this pick six, how do you want to light this candle, my friend?
Well, I think it's important to just touch on the fact that we obviously have Mage's full brother to kick things off, and Dornock for Danny Gargan with Louis Saez aboard. Horse threw out a 46-2 bullet gate work right before the race. So this horse means serious business and is the 2-1 morning line favorite. But I do think the number 9 horse, Global Perspective for Chad Brown, is really interesting if you like pedigrees. Has produced 3 first out winners. And the horse that did not win first time out went on to be a 4-time winner in her own right. So a lot of success there. And so those are the 2 that I really zeroed in on in this particular race.
I get it. Both on my radar. I put Dornick on top, and I want to use your 9 runner. You know that longtime listeners, though, that's an angle I love, looking into the dam's produce and seeing how precocious they were. But I thought it was worth giving a shout also to the number 8 Lambo. This is an angle I also talk about all the time. Bet hard on debut and didn't break particularly well. Very often that bet hard, that's a proxy for having early speed. I think Lambo can do a lot better with a cleaner get out of there and will like this extra ground. Not quite sure what the bore out was in the lane last time. That's not great, but with that race under the girth, maybe we do better. It's a lot using 3 in a spot like this to get things kicked off, but I think that's how I'm going to play it. 4, 8, and 9, 9 and 4 for Matt as we move on to grade 1 action on this Saturday card. Major Breeders' Cup sprint stuff going on. We saw Echo Zulu run a hole in the wind the other day. Interesting to see if she goes sprint or filly and mare sprint. Eventually, it might have to do with what one of the runners in this race, Gunite, does. Of course, we also have the defending champ, Elite Power, back in this spot. For me, I mean, this is also pretty reductive, but I just was going to try to lock it up with those 2. But if pressed for a top pick, I would pick Gunite. I think has the potential tactical advantage. And as a 4-year-old, too, late in the 4-year-old season, maybe just a little bit more of a progressive profile than Elite Power. might be twice the price. I know obviously Elite Power has him on the form book from the overseas run, but in reality, I'm probably going to look to use both of these where I can, but I also might, from a value point of view, look to press Gunite a little bit. Matt, is it all about these two for you? Do you have preference? Do you have anything clever?
Too clever, but I have some clever things later on. But this one, I'm not going to try to get too fancy. I like Gunite as well. That's my top pick, and actually, that's going to be my single in this particular sequence. I just, I think you have to find ways of, finding singles, and I had a really hard time finding singles in some of the other legs here. So this is one where, listen, Gunite's best when you look at a buyer speed figure standpoint is simply better than Elite Power's best, and they just, they matched up before. Obviously, Elite Power's gotten the better of Gunite twice, but that time out for Gunite was very, very impressive. And then you saw the horse that came in second, Bango, come back and win next time out as well. I think Steve Asmussen's got this one ready to roll for Saratoga. I think he's going to have a big, big Saratoga meet. And I think Echo Zulu is just the precursor to a lot of other big things for him.
I can totally see that. And in truth, construction wise, that is the wiser way to do it, I would say. But I think I have enough long shots later. I can't help but have some things go along. A lot of times there's a difference between playing a bet to maximize the expected value, which I would describe more of what you're doing here, frankly, and me, who will sometimes play these bets on a Saturday as a tournament, and because they're fun. And I'm not looking to get the worst of it spreading, crazy everywhere. But in a spot like this, I will sometimes describe myself as not being a hero and trying to just lock it up and move on. And we will move on to race number 9, where we've got this 3-year-old allowance race for fillies and mares. We're going a mile on the inner. Matt, we'll keep it with you.
Yeah, so I really like my top pick in this one is actually the number 11 horse Spongy, 9-2 for Bill Mott. I really like this horse a lot. I like the name too. I think it's a little, fun name to say. But one of the things that I've noticed with the way the Saratoga turf course is playing is you really want to have horses that are forward on the turf, and you really want to make sure that you find these horses that have these kind of nice stalking trips. You don't really want deep closers on this course, and Spongy's got nice early speed. I think we'll be able to cross and clear a lot of horses from that 11 post and get out there and sit that kind of nice stalking, tracking type of a trip, and then be able to launch for home late. And this is one coming out of some, that last state restricted stakes race, Ticonderoga, that was on the turf. I mean, that 90 speed figure is good enough to win in this sort of a spot. I will also be including the 5 Expand the Map for Chad Brown, as well as the 6 Diamond Hands for Todd Pletcher. So I'll go 3 deep in this particular one. Listen, those are 2 very serious trainers with very serious, intentions and horses in this spot. Both of them have really demonstrated a lot of ability. The reason Spongy is my top choice is, quite frankly, he's found the winner's circle more times than those 2 who seem to like to finish second a lot, but are super talented.
That was my concern with both the 5 and the 6 was the nibbly aspect. I'm not going to say hang. We won't use the H word, but we'll say the nibbly aspect of them. I was absolutely with you on Spongy. I had as my top pick, and yes, excellent name for one. By Hard Spun out of Scroogey, Spongy. And this is a pedigree cross I've gone on about. I love the Danzig blood via Hard Spun cross with the Smart Strike blood. I mean, that just gets the pedigree geek in me very, very much to the party. But I made my top pick number 10, Get Your Kicks. And this was one just based on how fast she was back in April at Gulfstream, just trying to project some improvement for her late in a 3-year-old year. For Chad Brown also, whose horses often don't perform that well compared to how they perform elsewhere at Gulfstream. I thought that was a very notable run. Just totally forgiving the May 13th run for the fact that it preceded a layoff. I just thought she had the scope to improve and get a forward trip. And I think you're right. I think even though it's not the easiest post in the world, Spongy should be able to trip out in here okay. So definitely want to keep her on side in this spot. The third number for me was going to be New Guinea. Now, granted, the 7 furlong big run last time, that was earned with a setup, but I thought there was an opportunity, depending on how things shake out in this race, that there could be a setup again. And if it does play into the hands of a closer, which again, not my preferred way of playing these races, but if it does go that way, I don't hate the idea of having that 9-runner New Guinea at least as a backup in this spot to my 10 and 11. So the 11, the common number between us there, 10, 11 for me with 9 on the beeline. Matt looking to get through 11, 5, and 6 in race number 9. Race 10 is the Jim Dandy. There's just 5 horses, but that doesn't mean it's not still kind of an interesting race. I guess the question, and I'll pose it to you, Matthew DeSantis, what do you do with Forte?
It's tough. I mean, I don't have as much confidence in him being a single in this particular spot. As I mentioned earlier, that was where I was going to go with Gunite because I didn't have a strong feeling. Listen, he outran my expectations in the Belmont. I was concerned about the Violence pedigree. I was concerned about the 10-week layoff. I just did not think he was going to run as big as he did. And for him to run that well off that layoff and all of the drama obviously surrounding him leading up to that race with the scratch of the Kentucky Derby, I thought was incredibly impressive. This is a tough field. I mean, Saudi Crown, who was a late entry, is really legitimate speed and is a very serious horse for Brad Cox, stretching out for the first time. Interestingly enough, I went back and looked. We've had a lot of 5 and 4 horse fields recently in the Jim Dandy. Nobody's gone gate to wire in those smaller fields. And nobody's gone gate to wire since Leoban did it back in 2016. So it's not the most common trip to have. I actually really like the other the only Steve Asmussen horse in this race, and that's Disarm. I think this is a horse that's just it's like his dad. He's just gonna keep getting better and better and better. And I'll be honest, there's some call for rain in the forecast on Saturday, and we saw what he did over a sloppy sealed track down at the Matt Winn last time out. So I'm gonna probably use Forte a little bit defensively here, but I'm gonna go 1-2 in this particular leg with Disarm and Forte as my top 2 selections.
I'm with you on Disarm. I'm going to try to make my stand in this race simply by trying to beat Forte. And I might be wrong here, but this is a horse, in speed figure terms. I mean, I know he's got the class, but I wonder if this is where he gets caught out for the fact that I'm not quite sure how fast he is. And yes, he did have a lot going against him, and he did get a good result in the Belmont, but he also just never looked comfortable to me. And adding the blinkers in a spot like this, I don't know how he's going to react with a quality speed like Saudi Crown in there. I'm going to try to beat him. He may kick sand in my face, and that's okay. But this is where I will try to get a little bit of separation. I was going to press Saudi Crown. That's a very good point about how even with short fields, we haven't seen a parade, as it were, of loose leaders in this spot. But I mean, as well as the Cox barn is going with the advantage he has on paper. Now, Forte will show more speed with those blinkers, but I also don't think they exactly want to get hooked up in any kind of duel. I think Saudi Crown could still get loose. We're still sort of looking for these progressive 3-year-olds to step up in these spots like we saw with Go Rocket Ride last weekend in the Haskell. He was going to be my A. I was going to use both Angel of Empire and Disarm as Bs, and I was going to go on with life as we proceed from this year's Jim Dandy, which will hopefully be a terrific renewal that'll send us a few more horses for the Travers, because that is shaping up to be one heck of a horse race. And if we can get some good performances in here, we could really bolster that field at the end of the summer. Let's talk about race number 11. We've got 3-year-old and up New York bred fillies and mares going 5.5 on the turf. Matt, I will throw the ball back in your court. Who do you like here?
Yeah, so there's a few different horses I like. I mean, I will say if this race does for some reason get taken off the turf, obviously the number 12 Sandy's Garden looks very, well intended to be on the dirt if they run on that surface. So that's one just to put an asterisk next to, depending on the surface switch. But in terms of how I'm going to be playing this, I really like a long shot here. I really like the number 6, Saratoga Chrome, quite a bit for Jeff Hiles. This is a horse that's second back from a 7-month layoff and is getting the blinkers added. And I think that's a perfect sort of setup here. I talked about the way this turf course plays. I think this horse can, sit a little bit more of a forward trip. Last time out was just so hopelessly behind. I just didn't really show a lot of interest. But again, that was the first time back. And Jeff Hiles has put this horse through, a series of works to get this horse better conditioned and ready, I think, for this time out. So I'll be including that horse. I also like the number 7, Carry, quite a bit, mainly because it's named after my dog. But also, I do actually like this Joe Sharp horse quite a bit as well. Should be sitting, again, very forwardly placed on this trip. And wasn't able to get the job done stretching out. They go back to sprinting, which is what this horse does best. I think, this is a horse that was in a stakes race, multiple stakes races earlier in his career. So I think this is one to consider at 6-1. And then I'll also include the number 9 Active Congress for Bruce Levine. And that's one, again, a lot of speed. If I sound like a broken record, it's because I am. You really want to be forwardly placed on this turf course. And so that's why I identified those 3.
I get it. And I think they all should get good trips, and I can't argue against. We're together with having Active Congress in the mix, a little oppo with the other picks, but it's that kind of race. I mean, I get everything you're saying. I tried to get a little bit of a price on top, though. The morning line, David Aragona didn't think this one was going to be any kind of a real long shot. He has Fancy Pants Juliana at 5-1, and he's very good at that game. I was trying to be a little bit clever with her, not just because my friend Juliana will be coming up here soon to Saratoga, and she has great fashion sense. This was one back on the best surface to me, 3rd time off the layoff, and I was hoping might get a little lost in the wagering. We'll see. It's a competitive betting heat that, as good as David is, maybe this is one we can sneak a point or two in the odds off that morning line. Active Congress looks the best speed. And then I thought the 8 Busy Morning, obvious if ready off this layoff, another one I wanted to include. I'll include yours as well in some sort of backup fashion. I think it's a pretty open looking race. Any further thoughts on this 11th before we head to the nightcap?
Yeah, it's a very spready race. I mean, this is one where your ticket can get real expensive real quick in this race. I think that a lot of the others, we can narrow it down to 2 or 3 and maybe even 1, but this one, all those ones you mentioned were ones I took hard, long looks at that I liked as well. So it's a tough race for sure.
Our nightcap is 1 3/8 maiden for fillies and mares on the inner turf. I don't mind. See, I often complain about maiden races in these sequences when they have form, like these horses do, as opposed to being first-time starters. I'm much cooler with that. I like that they're carting these races. I love the idea of more races going along on dirt and turf. There's just some horses who aren't going to be suited by, not able to compete with the demands of shorter races, who still have plenty of ability. This kind of a race gives them a chance to show it. I have kind of a half-baked wise guy idea in here, but I'll ask you the question first when it comes to this Pick 6 on Saturday at NYRA. How are we going to get paid, my friend?
Well, I'm going to try to get paid with a horse that has actually burned some money the last few times out, but is now finally at the right price, in my opinion, which is the number 5 Callie's Grit, 8-1. And this is a horse that's for Joe Sharp. And listen, I get it if people look at this and go, listen, this is a horse that has lost as the favorite 3 times. You're not going to get 2-1 on this horse this time. That's the benefit. This horse, you're going to get a price now. And I think this horse has every reason to be really effective this time out. I think that going longer is actually, I think, better. If you look at that running style, it doesn't pass a lot of horses, but that tends to be the running style that does well going a little bit longer. We saw that with a horse like Next on the dirt as well. Once they stretched that horse out, became a totally different type of a horse. And so I think the extra furlongs are going to be beneficial for this one. And it is a very well-intended filly. So was in a stakes place 2nd time out at Kentucky Downs, and now this will be the 4th time back in 2023. But one of those efforts was in an off-turf instance, and still ran well there. So if for some reason they do take it off the turf, I actually like this horse quite a bit. And then, listen, I'll probably include the 6 and the 7 here as well. The 6 for Mike Maker. Mike Maker going long on the turf is never a bad thing. And this is a horse that's turned in a lot of honest efforts and, lost to Highland Grace 2 races back, who I think is a pretty nice horse. And then She's Mo Bubbly, the number 7 for Todd Pletcher. Again, stretching out, just lost to Highland Grace last time out as well. And I think is, well meant for the spot.
Makes sense. I mean, again, a place where you can go a lot of different directions. I was just going to reach into the bag of tricks for a pure pedigree play with number 1 Southampton Dock and that English Channel Kitten's Joy cross that I also really, really like for the turf, especially going long on turf, that has given it, which this course might if the race stays on the grass. Just seemed to me like a horse that had enough form to build on, that going long, they could be a completely different animal. Lots of ones to use in the backups, 3 that I'll mention real quickly to repeat some of yours also, about the 3, 7, and 9 basically are the horses. Nothing special or clever other than just, pedigrees. I like enough form and pedigree that I think they're going to improve for this. And I don't really have a knock. I mean, I totally understand your pace angle on Callie's Grit. That makes sense to me as well. I was a little bit worried about all the seconds, but it can be such a different game going longer. And I think you're right. Probably she's a likely leader in this spot, and maybe that gets her over some of that second and third itis that she's shown on some combinations. I might end up throwing in your others as well here, but those were my main thoughts. As for my long shot, number 1 here, is it one that you can see if you squint?
Absolutely. The pedigree is fantastic. That was one of the things that I'm glad you brought that one up. This was just on the outside of my ticket. And just like from a ticket construction standpoint, these last 2 legs are just bears because you can go really deep in all of them and make really legitimate arguments for all of these horses. So definitely one I like a lot. And, I also really like Ian Wilkes on the turf in general, as well as a trainer. So there was a lot to like there about that number 1 for sure.
Nothing to argue about, at least. That's good. All right. I loved having you. Fantastic work on this. We fought through those Wi-Fi issues and we got the job done. Usually I'm the guy with the hat, but I'm okay. We can both do that on my areas. No problem at all. Check out Matthew's work over at NYRA.com through the NYRA Bets social stuff, through his own social. I'm assuming your social will send out everything you're doing at Fail to Menace. Is that about right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything from NYRA Bets, from promotions to handicapping videos to analysis to the written work, etc. If you follow me, you'll be able to find it all.
Great stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, we have much more over at the podcast. Check out In the Money Media, wherever you get your podcast. Let us know who you think is going to win these stakes races in the YouTube comments as well. Who's going to win the Vanderbilt? Who's going to win the Jim Dandy? Give us a cold double. And I don't know, maybe I'll come up with some sort of fabulous prize if somebody gives it to a straight, which I think they probably will be able to, given these field sizes, without too much trouble. But Matthew, can't wait to have you back on, and we'll be talking soon.
Really appreciate it.